Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Like John said, we are, I've been in partnership with the Hub office for a long time doing these trainings. This is our second one for vendor contract management course. So it is a lot of good information, and we're really going to talk about after you get the contract and just how to manage that contract with the state, some ins and outs of contract management and payment and other things like that that are nuances with the state. So like Carla said, my name is Meredith Swartz. I am the purchasing director for the Department of Administration. We are a very diverse department. We are the business officer for all of the state departments. So we're kind of unique. We call ourselves the land of the misfit toys. When we have these smaller agencies that they can't figure out where to put them, they give them to us. But the main DOA agencies include advocacy programs such as the Hub office. And so that's why I've worked directly with them to set these trainings up to make sure that our vendors are aware of all of the procurement rules and laws, and then the management of those contracts once they're awarded. We also have asset management groups under DOA, which includes facility management. We manage all of the buildings downtown Raleigh in the downtown complex. We have state construction, which is a separate, state construction is one of the divisions that I buy for at DOA. If state construction needs something, know that state construction rules and procedures and the way that they manage their contracts are under different laws than goods and services. So when we're talking about the management of a contract, these concepts that we're going to talk about today are just good for any kind of contract you have with the state, including those state construction. Just know when you're bidding these different solicitations that go out and things, if it's a state construction, it's under different rules and laws than goods and services. And what I am the procurement director of is goods and services procurement. We have state parking. We manage all the parking decks around the downtown complex and state property. So we manage all of the state's property across the entire state. Then we have some services groups such as Mail Service Center. We manage motor fleet. We buy all the vehicles for the state. And actually Purchase and Contract, which is the governing authority of goods and service purchases within the state, is one of our divisions. So if Purchase and Contract has to buy something, they come through us. And then we have federal and state surplus property. If you've taken my other training, this is always a good place where if you're starting a business or you're setting up a business or you need equipment or you need desks and file cabinets and things like that, federal surplus property is over off of Chapel Hill Road. They're going towards Cary. They have a warehouse. Anyone in the public can go and buy equipment, computers, vehicles, all kinds of things from state and federal surplus property at that location open to the public. So know that that's out there for you guys to use. And like I said, we are the land of the misfit toys. So we have a couple of these extra departments that we buy for, which includes State Board of Elections, Office of State Human Resources, Lieutenant Governor, and Military and Veterans Affairs. So with all of that, we buy a lot of diverse things. We have a lot of different types of contracts that we manage here at DOA. I know that we see in the question, Carla will send out the slides as we, at the end of today, along with a survey. So you will get a copy of the slides in this presentation. All right, so this class is going to cover, I've been awarded a contract, now what? So we're going to go through the award process and the documents you receive for the award, contract formation, so how to form that contract, all those documents that become part of that contract. We're going to talk about contract management, contract performance, and then get you paid, the payment process, and then once the contract is over, how to close out that contract on your end and our end. So first, what has happened is you've gone through all of that bid process, which we know is a pain, and you've done all of that and submitted your proposals and gone on to EVP and found those opportunities and then bid on it, and now you've been awarded. And so we're going to go through what happens and how you get notified of that award. So know that once all the approvals have been made, at the state. So depending on how much money we're spending and what type of service or good we are buying, it will have to go through additional approvals. So once those approvals have been made, the agency purchasing office will directly notify the awarded vendor. The award will also be posted for the world to see out on North Carolina Electronic Vendor Portal, which is also EVP. That is usually happens within 3 days of once we've gotten that final approval, and it will remain posted indefinitely now. So if you ever want to see anything that has been posted on EVP that went out for bid out on EVP, now the tabulations and the awards will stay out there indefinitely. So that is where you find, EVP is where you find opportunities to bid, and it is also where we post our tabulations and our awards. Those tabulations will be updated with the vendor pricing. On the normal now, when we do the bid opening, we just list out who has bid until it has gone through the entire process, and then we update that tabulation with the pricing of every vendor and include the award. The event in sourcing, so when you go to bid on a tool, we go to bid on an opportunity in the formal bid process, we know that through EVP, it links you into the Ariba sourcing tool to actually submit your bid. Once it is awarded, that event will be closed in Ariba. So all of the information for that particular procurement, which includes the bid numbers, any attachments, the RFP, IFB, whatever the solicitation document was, and any addendums will stay out on EVP for you to be able to find it later. The awarded vendor will receive a finalized, fully executed contract. And with that, we're going to go through what is included in that actual contract. So we're talking about contract formulation. This is the documentation that actually becomes your contract. So it includes what you submitted as your proposal along with the solicitation document that was filled out. That's why we ask you to resubmit the RFP, the IFB, the RFQ, whatever that, which is invitation for bids, request for proposal, or request for quote. All of that documentation that we sent out to solicit now becomes your contract, along with that you have signed and executed and we have signed and executed. It could also include where you had all of your proposal information. Everything that was included in that bid process, your proposal is finally executed, and that is part of the contract. It includes the North Carolina terms and conditions, any addendums that were posted during the bid process, which would include any question and answers that were posted during the bid process, any addendums that could have changed part of the scope, could have changed any of the information that was in the solicitation. All those addendums become part of the contract. It includes your proposal, so any information that you submitted as the vendor. It could include any best and final offers, which is a document that we use to, during negotiations, to finalize those negotiations. BAFOs are normally also executed by the vendor and by the state to solidify those negotiations. Any requests for clarifications that happened during the evaluation stage where we reached out and said, we don't understand something in your proposal, and you submitted back, yes, this is what I mean, those become part of the contract. Usually we send out a certification of award, and this is usually just a one-page letter memo that will say the outline of this company has been awarded this contract, this is the term, this is how much money it is, and now here is the contract administrator that you can now contact. So that's called a certification of award, and that becomes part of the contract as well. Throughout the life of the contract, we're going to have amendments. Things always change, so any amendments that happen, those are put in writing and they're executed by both parties. That becomes part of the contract. Often our terms include optional renewal. So they could be a one-year contract with 2 optional renewals. So those renewal agreements become part of the contract. And then the purchase order on the back end. So the purchase order is the payment mechanism that gets the ball rolling that then you can invoice against, that then we pay against. So the purchase order is also part of the contract. So all of this different documentation, we are the document people, all becomes part of your contract. When we talk about signatures, make sure that we at the state, we have people who are authorized to sign. So when this is executed by a person that has signature authority. Every state agency has a signature authority policy that outlines who can sign what kind of documents and delegation amounts. So when this is fully executed, it is executed by somebody that has that signature authority. And then also, like I said, those BAFOs that would have solidified any negotiations that happened during the evaluation phase of the contract. Those also have the same signature block where it required your signature. We will also execute that, and that then becomes part of that formal contract. So we talk about purchase orders. Purchase orders come, most of our state agencies, almost all, I believe DOT is right now the only one that still is using a SAS system, but everybody else uses e-procurement. And so within e-procurement, purchase orders are listed. That is how we issue electronically purchase orders, is through our e-procurement system. Those are issued to the address and to the email address that is set up in EVP. That is where you register. And as a hub vendor, you are automatically registered in e-procurement, or registered in EVP. That's one of the first steps to become a hub vendor. So if you are in EVP, please go in and check your registration. Make sure your email addresses are up to date. Make sure your location addresses are up to date. That's where we send checks. That's where those opportunities to bid goes to. All of that information is on the vendor to update that. If you have any trouble updating your registration in EVP, call the help desk. And Carla, if you could put the help desk number and email address in the chat, that'd be great. But when we get those purchase orders, they include a lot of information. They usually include, and they should, if you have a contract that's associated, should mirror what's on the contract. So there'll be a description of the items or the service, the bid number, the accounting codes that are associated with payment, pricing. It could have delivery option, payment terms, effective dates of the contract, including any renewals. So know that I know at DOA, we issue a new PO for every year of the contract. So if we exercise an optional renewal, you would get a new PO to then bill off of. It could include transportation, freight, terms and conditions, comments to vendors. So the great thing about e-procurement is it allows us to put comments in that purchase order. So it could say something like, we don't have a loading dock and we just ordered 5 million batteries and you don't have anywhere to go. So just be mindful of those comments. Could have important information to go to the vendor. It also could have contact information of who you need to talk to at that particular agency now to set up any kind of kickoff meeting or registration. So the buyer and contract administrator information will also be on your purchase order. So I'm gonna stop there for a minute. Any questions so far?
We do not have questions in the chat.
Okay. And know that e-procurement has a website that you can go out and get information on the help desk, on job aids, on how those purchase orders work, and any information. It also is linked to EVP. So if you have any problems with EVP, there's a lot of job aids of how to update your registration and things like that out on the e-procurement website. All right, I'm gonna keep on checking. All right, so you now have this contract, and we always suggest that you start off a kickoff meeting with whoever the actual agency is. You've gone through all that bid process and worked directly with the purchasing office, but now you're going to be able to work with a contract administrator. So we suggest to have that kickoff meeting and identify roles and responsibilities. Maybe you had a salesperson that actually submitted the bid, and now you have somebody that's going to be the technicians that are actually going to do the work, or project managers, or fiscal representatives. Maybe you have somebody else you need to identify where your billing is going and things like that. So having this kickoff meeting can be a great start to identify those roles and responsibilities between the state of who you need to send stuff to and between you guys as a vendor where we need to send stuff to. Provide contact information for each one of those team members and clarify any terms and conditions. Know that if you set up a landscape bid and all of a sudden they start talking about, I need you to take care of the ants problem, if that's not in your contract, don't do it. Make sure that if you need to make any changes, we need to do an amendment and things like that. So during that kickoff meeting, really define those tasks, that work that's supposed to be done under that contract. Are there any additional steps before work can start? Do you have to have background checks done? Do you have to badge your employees so that you can get into buildings? Do you buy supplies that are needed for this project or whatnot? Know that during the bid process, we are not obligated to give you an award. Do not buy supplies for a project. But keep in mind that we know how inflation is and things like that that are going up. When you're bidding, make sure you're bidding appropriately, that it will take time to get the award, and then potentially pricing could go up. So just be mindful of that. Never order supplies for a project until you actually have an award. Maybe establish goals and objectives with our team to make sure that everybody's on the same page. It takes a lot of work for us to get to an award. We definitely want to work with you and make sure that everybody's on the same page with that contract and that we all know how it's going to function and we're all doing our best to keep it going in the right way. Know what's in that specifications or scope of work. We say scope of work for services, specifications for goods. Know what's in there. Know what the product was that we were asking for. Know those terms and conditions that are within that contract. We know it's 100 pages worth of documentation, but you should know what you are obligating your company to do when you bid. So with that, know what's in that contract, know what anytime you have to do those pre-contract effective dates. So we do sometimes ask for background checks. The pricing for those background checks is on the vendor. So once you get awarded, maybe we have to go through the background checks, badging, any manuals that have to be submitted, user access to our systems, security required on staffing and equipment. Maybe you have to receive equipment or we have to receive that equipment to get it going. All of that needs to take time. So make sure that you have enough time to get that before you start work. And we try to get our awards so that we have enough time for that. So if we know we have, let's just say, a janitorial bid that is going to start February 1, we would have tried to award that at least by January 15th. So we have enough time to get those people's background checks, get them badged, have a meeting so that we know what they're doing and all of that for that janitorial service. Also confirm the deliverables, reporting requirements. Make sure if there's reports that are due, you have discussed and know when those reports are due, where you're supposed to submit them, things like that. Delivery times and instructions. We could have based an award by the fact that you said you were going to get it to here in 15 days. So make sure that if that's the case, that you get it to wherever it's going in 15 days. Know those tasks, because anything that is written in that contract is what the state will hold you liable to. So once everybody's agreed upon it, that is where your performance will be held to what is in writing in that contract. So I know we have a hand raised. I'll stop real fast. We have Claudia. If you want to take yourself off mute.
Good morning.
Morning.
One of my question is, I received the email from I can do a bid on February 19, and my wondering is, the bid is certain time, so I have to go in person or I have to submit just by email?
So you got to notice that the bid opening is on February 15th. Is that what you said?
No, February 19 is the date for the bid. I have to send by email or I have to go in person to the place?
You don't have to go in person to the place, I wouldn't think, but whatever's in that solicitation document, there should be a section called submittal, and it will give you all the instructions on how to submit.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Yeah.
thank
So
you.
just look in that solicitation document. It'll give you all
Oh,
that information because it could be different depending on the agency.
yes. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So getting into contract management, we're going to talk about contract monitoring. Like I said, we are the document people. We are constantly having our procurement files are up to date with everything, including not just once the contract is established, but through the life of the contract. So maybe it's a good idea, or it is a good idea for you also to keep that documentation so that you know how this contract is too going, and make sure that you monitor that performance as well. But establish a good contract management plan. So identify those roles and responsibilities like we talked about, figure out who's doing what, maybe set up a client profile for each of us so that you know, hey, this is where, if I need to contact somebody about billing, this is who I need to call. If I need to contact somebody about 24-hour service, this is what I need to call. So set up that client profile that includes those contact information. Document your start and end date so that you know, I mean, we will notify you as to when our contract is getting ready to end, or if we have that renewal, when we're ready to renew, but know when your contract starts and ends. If you had to upload staff and you know that you're getting towards the end of that contract, you might need to inform your staff that, hey, this is going back out for bid. We're no longer going to have, we potentially no longer would have this this service. So know when those contract end and start dates are. Have checklists for your deliverables so that everybody's on the same page, that you've done this. I know when I sent it. And so when somebody comes back and say we didn't get it, yeah, we do. Here we go. It's right here. Here's the forwarded email where I sent it. Define those subcontractor relationships. Know that when the state writes a contract for goods and services, we are contracting with the prime. We are not contracting with a sub. Now, there can be subs sometimes, unless they're excluded within the solicitation for some reason. But if there is a subcontractor prime relationship, that relationship the state does not get into. So make sure that you are, if you're the prime, you are setting up that relationship to make sure your subcontractor is doing what's in that contract. Because if they're not, we're coming to you. We're not coming to the prime. And as a subcontractor, I always think it would be a good idea to set up a contract between you and the prime so that you know that everybody's on the same page, because you can't come to the state and be like, well, I was a subcontractor and this is what happened. I don't want to say we don't care, but that's our contract is with the prime. So that is where we will go back to try to fight for that relationship, is between us and the prime. Notify your contract administrator, your manager, of any issues up front, changes to the scope, or if your staff is changing in a timely manner. Know that some of our contracts say that you have to let us know if you are changing any of the staff. And there are some time limits on that, especially for ones that are badged into buildings. We can't have badges just floating around. We do have sensitive information in our buildings and things like that. So notify your contract administrator as soon as possible if you have any staffing changes. Monitor and document the progress throughout the life of the contract. Once you have that contract and through that project, it's not done just because you got awarded. You need to continue to monitor, because we are monitoring through the life of the project. Know that there's probably inspections and testing and things like that that could have been in the scope of that contract. We will monitor that through the life. It's a good idea to set up a file. This is just some suggestions coming from us of what are good things to keep in your file. One, all of those documents that I talked about in your contract. Set up that management plan that includes the contacts, those deliverables, those tasks. Communications. Keep every email. We do. Keep every email because you know that that's your documentation to go back and say, yeah, I did. Here it is. Here it is right here. Any reports that you send, keep that in a file. Shipping documents. Know that when you're shipping, until we receive in e-procurement, the shipping and the liability on those goods is on the vendor. As soon as we receive it, now it's on us. But know that we have FOB shipping so that anything that you are sending is your responsibility to get us to us. Once we receive it in e-procurement, now it's our responsibility. So if you have any back orders or things like that, just let us know so that we can mark that in e-procurement. Invoices, keep those invoices. Keep when we have payment, when you've received payment, receipts, billing documents. Somebody I'm gonna put on, if you mute your phone, if you can. Performance reviews, inspection and testing reports. So if we are having inspections, performance reviews and inspection and testing reports, if you want to keep those in the file, know that that's, if you have performance reviews and inspection, that's usually written into the contract as to when we're doing those, how we're doing those. Contract modifications. So anytime we do an amendment, anytime we change something, anytime that there's a renewal that's executed, keep those. A list of state furnished property and information for those services. For some reason, we have some kind of contract where our badges. So we have to give you badges to get into the building. Make sure that you're keeping up with who has a badge. We're keeping up with it too. But who has a badge? You've gotten that badge back when they left. You've gone through those background checks. Any of that state issued actual property is your responsibility to keep up with. So make sure that you have that documented in the file as well. So nothing is the same in contracting except for change. We constantly, things are changing. We know that things change for you guys, things change for us. So we have two different documents that we use to document that change once we have a contract. We have renewals. Renewals are written into the contract. There are also extensions, but renewals were written in up front. So our standard for an agency to approve is a 3-year contract term. Often we do 1 year with 2 optional renewals. If we can do longer terms, we just have to justify why. So we could have over 3 years. That just requires additional approvals to have a longer than 3-year term. Those optional renewals are built into that original term. And then renewals are optional for the state to use. There's lots of times and reasons as to why we exercise or why we don't. It could be funding. It could be that our scope is changing so much we're going to put it back out for bid. It could be that those services are no longer needed. It could be a lot of options as to why we wouldn't exercise a renewal, but the option to exercise is up to the state. The renewal agreement is then sent if we do want to use that renewal. We will send either an amendment or a renewal letter to the vendor that just gets both of us to exercise that renewal. That starts your next year of the contract, and most often you'll get a new purchase order for that next year of the contract. Make sure that you're using that purchase order for the correct term of the contract. Amendments change anything. So through the term of the contract, if you ever have a change, that is done by an amendment. We document those changes. It could change anything. It could change rates. It could extend the term of a contract. There could be changes to a scope. It could change cost. Whatever it is, that change is then documented on an amendment and signed by both parties. Just know that only the purchasing office can change the terms of a contract. So if the guy is telling you, yeah, well, you just add the ants to my landscaping situation and take care of the ants and I'll just pay you for it, be like, no, no, no. we got to put that in writing because otherwise I won't get paid for it. Because when the purchase order comes in and it's not on a purchase order and there's no amendment attached, we're not paying for it. So be mindful of that you always make those changes and we always document. So I'm going to stop there. I think we have a couple of questions and hands up. We're going to start with the hands up.
We do have a few in the chat that we can address quickly. How much time does it usually take before the award?
It depends on the type of solicitation. So if it is a lowest bid meeting specs, and that's what we're awarding on, and it's under agency delegation, that can happen pretty quickly. If it is something where it has to go through additional approvals, or if it's a complex RFP where we have to evaluate the evaluation criteria and they get those approvals, it can be a lengthy process from start to finish. So I'm talking anywhere from 3 to 6 months. So it really depends on the procurement. But like I said, if you have any questions during that period of evaluation, so after bid opening and then before it is awarded, you can always reach out to the purchasing office and say, hey, where is it? Is it getting approved? Are y'all done evaluating? Has it gone to the final approval people? And they'll usually tell you where it is in the process. So just know that sometimes it just depends on all those approvals and where they have to go. That really monitors that time.
Awesome. And then the next question, does the contractor usually initiate the kickoff meeting or the state?
Either one, really. I know that some of our facility guys, they're really good about it, and then some aren't. So if you haven't heard from them and you've received the award, by all means, if you want to set it up, it doesn't really matter who does, but it's always a good idea.
All right, now hands raised. I was thinking it may eliminate some of the hands, so we can go to hands raised with Claudia is the first.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I already
Okay.
made permission. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Claudia.
Yes.
Garlinda?
Thank you. Good morning. I had two questions. One is the required documentation that you mentioned in the last set of slides. Is there a template that we follow in terms of documentation?
Documentation as to what is in your contract?
Documentation as to where you said it's our responsibility to update all documentation throughout the process of the bid.
We don't have a checklist, but you will get a copy of this slide, and that really is a great checklist there. I'm assuming you're talking about this, the administration file. I mean, you'll have this. That's a good overall checklist of things to put into.
That. Let me ask it a different way. So let's say once you've received the award and now you've started the work, and I'm updating you each step of the way of what I'm doing in terms of we completed this, step one, we completed step two, we completed all the individual pieces. Are we updating that with a templated form, or we're just doing that on a Word document?
However you guys want to do that. That's up to you. Yeah. However you want to keep up with it. We just suggest that you keep up with it because we'll probably keep it up with it too.
Okay, and then the other one was you mentioned the lowest bid award if it's under agency delegation, that's pretty quick. What would be an example of a lowest bid award just for a random department?
Well, something that would be lowest bid for us would be a janitorial contract. We would go through and look for responsiveness, and we might have requirements in there that the vendor has to have cleaned a certain amount or something like that, but it would be, the award would be based on lowest bid meeting those requirements. So an RFP could be something much more complex, like a consultant service, where we want to look at what have you done in the past and who's doing the work and how you're going to accomplish the project and things like that. And if we're going through a full evaluation on that, those are the type of things that can take a little bit longer to award.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hensby?
Hensby.
Yes, how you doing? Quick question. Will there be help throughout this process? Like, can we call you all and ask you guys a question throughout the bid? I mean, throughout the actual process of the job.
Yes. So once you are awarded, so the whole time you're going through the bid process, the person you can talk to is whoever is the procurement person for that particular project. So that would be listed in the bid document. That would be listed on EVP. That is your contact through the bid process. Once you have been awarded, it should be identified who your contract administrator is. And that is the person that will walk you through the actual project.
Yes.
So that's usually a person at the agency level that will manage the contract, work with you to make sure that the project is completed. So if you ever have any questions, once you get into the project, that would be your contact to
Gotcha.
step you through that process. Yep.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it's a good idea during that kickoff meeting is to identify who has those roles.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank
you. You're welcome.
Matthew Martin.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Hey, this is Matthew with Destination Medical. So I believe you touched on this, but my web service kind of went in and out. With any type of contract modifications that happens after award.
Mm-hmm.
So like, for example, I work with large capital equipment. If for some reason lead times were to change after the award, who would I contact? Would it be the purchasing officer or?
You would probably start with your contract administrator, and then they will get with the purchase office to document those changes. So just make sure if somebody doesn't say, hey, I'm going to put this in writing, that you say, no, we need to put this in writing. So, because sometimes there's lies, but to cover your end and our end, we want it in writing so that everybody's on the same page. That's why that's there. So that then if they come back and you say, nope, we told you this had to be here, and now we're going to give you a bad performance, you were like, no, we signed this contract extension or this amendment that stated all of this, so everybody's on the same page. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Dre Richmond, unmute.
Oh, I think we lost him.
Dre?
No, one moment.
Oh, okay.
Okay. We're getting feedback.
All right. Can you hear me clearly now?
I
Yes.
sure can.
I apologize. I had my computer on too, and it was like,
Yep.
Good. So, thank you for the information that you already shared with us. This is very informative. My eyes caught it, so I'm glad I got on here. And I just had a question regarding, like, I run a marketing company, and I've been bidding like crazy. And I had a question regarding the process when you win a contract, right? Or when you win a contract and you in a like regular client relationship, are they leading the process more? Or are you leading the process like a normal client that you will work with in B2B?
I would think for something like marketing, I mean, I think those responsibilities are shared to some extent, but yeah, if your bid said that I'm going to do this, then yeah, you're leading that. I think it depends on what the project is. If you're leading a concrete contract, then yeah, you definitely are the specialist. We don't know anything about contract. We just wanted you to come in and put it down. You know what I mean? So I think with something like marketing, if that included the input of the agency to give information as to what you are going to market, then I think that's definitely a shared responsibility on, do I have to get you the information first before you can then create the advertisement or whatnot?
Okay, so we just like kind of gauge the relationship based on how it starts out because every agency will work it differently.
Yes, I would think it would depend on the different agencies and what the services are for.
Okay, so nobody's like what do they say? Like no shoe fits the same person or something like that?
Right.
I see.
Exactly.
Okay, that's good to know. That was very informative because that was something I was always curious about, but that makes it more simple now. Just handling them like a normal client that you don't even know.
Yeah, and I would tell you that, in our other class where we teach you about how to bid, one of the best things to do is use that question and answer period ask any questions about what they have in that scope, ask any questions on how they're going to award. That is your time to reach out and touch somebody and say, "What this doesn't make sense to me. How is this going to function?" Those types of things, and really use that so that you know what you're walking into when you submit your proposal.
Thank you, Meredith.
You're welcome. All right, Anya.
Hi, good morning. I was just wondering if this information will be available offline, like the slideshow, because I'm driving and I'm trying to take notes, but well, not
yeah,
driving.
we're gonna send out the slide presentation, and it's also being recorded. So the Hub office will post the recording out on their website as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
All right. I think we got Matthew and Kinsey, unless you had another one. Matthew, do you have another one?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
So my question is, I work with products. So if I was to happen to ship products to someone like FedEx and FedEx was to lose the package, would that result in a bad performance review for me for situations like that?
I mean, it is your responsibility to get us to us. I can't say it would be a bad performance, but that it is, until we receive it in e-procurement, it's on you to get it to us. So however that works to get it to us,
Yeah.
I'm assuming if you did your best to make sure that we got it, I wouldn't do a bad performance review unless that's my answer, is that you need to, it's on the vendor until we receive it to make sure it gets to us and isn't broken and is correct and all of that. And then once we receive it in e-procurement, then it's our responsibility. So we try to teach our people that if you're ordering a box of pens and folders and everything else, and you never open that box when you get it, and then a month later you go to open it and there was no pens in it, that's on you because you received it in e-procurement. So just know that the vendor is responsible for those products until we receive it in e-procurement.
Makes sense.
Yep. All right, I'm going to continue on with the onslaught of time, if that's okay, Carla.
Yes. Thank you,
One,
Meredith.
can I get one last question?
Sure.
That's
I'm
Kinsey.
sorry. When is the next class on bidding?
Our Purchasing 101 next class is February 21st. And you can go to our website. It's on the website for registering.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so we're going to get into contract performance and how we measure that and how some different things with performance. So first of all, we do have some projects information that includes inspections and testing. If there are inspections where we have to inspect installed equipment or something like that, all of that information of when those will happen will be in that solicitation document. Inspections are conducted and document the compliance with the scope of work or the product specifications. So that's basically just saying we can inspect or we can judge your performance only based on what's in that scope of work within that solicitation document. Specifications may include product testing requirements. So it might be some kind of equipment that you have to install, and then you have to make sure that it's working before you can bill us for it. Delivery is not considered to have occurred until installation has been completed and disposal of any waste. We always say, make it look like it was never, that you installed it and you left it just like you found it. The vendor is responsible for leaving the installation area clean and ready to use. Services are to be inspected by the contract administrator. So if we have a service contract, it's on our contract administrators to make sure that service is completed and then it's done. They will judge that based on what was in the scope of work. Invoices will not be paid until using agency completes that inspection of our goods. And with that, if it's something that's shipped, you can't invoice until we receive it, and then we say that we received it. So if it's something that's actually a piece of equipment installed, you can't invoice until we've done that inspection. It's up and running and testing, as it said in that solicitation document. So communication and documentation, like I say, purchasing is always the document people. Make sure that the state will notify you of any inaccurate goods, but you also notify us. We do have a way in e-procurement to say we didn't get XYZ. We only received the folders and we didn't get the pins. So we do have a way in there that if you have a late shipment or something's on back order, but just let us know, just notify those statements so we can keep that relationship going and know that it's coming, or maybe we need to order something different. Just be in that constant communication with us, and we try to do that as well. If requesting those change orders, those amendments, make sure that you provide us a quote with how much that amendment will cost us. So it could be that if we say we need to change or we need to do these additional services. So now you've laid the concrete out there, and now we need somebody to come paint the parking spots. And we didn't think about that in the front, so we're going to have to amend this contract to add that painting. It might be something that we need a quote for so that we know how much to amend that contract for. It also could be something that when you provide that quote, we're like, maybe we'll do that as a separate project and put that piece out for bid. So just know that we could ask you for additional quotes, even if you fully have a contract. And when we get those quotes for those amendments, we don't necessarily have to amend the contract. We could make the decision that that's kind of outside the scope, and we're going to go do a different solicitation for that. Document all your communications for references, because we're keeping every email. It's just a good idea for you guys to have for references. Keep every communication that you get from us. So we do have complaints. I mean, things happen. So usually with complaints, it's usually like a 3-step process. So if the contract manager inspects those documents, they're our first line of defense. Outside of purchasing, we've done the bid process, and then we hand this contract over to the administrator to actually manage the contract. So they will reach out to, if they have a complaint or something is wrong, they should be the first line of defense to work with the vendor and make sure they're getting, 1, what we're paying for, and then 2, what is in that contract is being followed. So works directly with the vendor to resolve any issues. The vendor is held accountable for what is written in that contract. Like I said, if they're complaining that you're not taking care of the ants and it's not in your contract, you can say that's not in the contract. So you have a copy of the contract, they have a copy of the contract, and tell me where it is written in this contract that I was supposed to take care of those ants. The vendor will be given the opportunity to fix the problem. That's the big thing, is that if they have a problem, you have the opportunity to fix the problem. Like I said, it takes forever for us to get a contract up and running. We would much rather try to fix any problems than start back over. So if we have an issue or have a complaint, do your best to work with us. We will work with you to fix those problems and give you the opportunity to cure. If it gets to the point where the contract administrator is not getting what you need to do in their contract, they can contact their purchasing office to ask us to submit a formal vendor complaint. Within that complaint, we are citing where we have found the vendor in breach of contract. So if it's gotten to that point, we've already documented, the contract administrator's already documented, here's what I've done to try to fix this problem, and they're still not doing it. Can you send them a letter that says that they're a breach? And so we will send a letter, and again, give you the opportunity to fix the problem. We will even give you some remedies that we think should happen to fix the problem. But be mindful, if you ever get a formal vendor complaint, there's deadlines to respond. You don't have to sign it to say I'm in agreement with the cure actions, but there are deadlines to reach back out to us, or we could terminate. So if you ever get to the point where you get a formal vendor complaint from a purchasing office, it's a pretty serious thing. Make sure you respond. You could always request a resolution meeting that we can have all together to discuss those problems and get all on the same page. Like I said, we're going to try our best to get everybody working together. The state could find a vendor in breach of contract for default, and therefore we would withhold payment until any of those remedies were met. So if you're found in breach, one of our options is we can withhold payment until the problem is fixed, or we could then terminate if we didn't get a response, or if we had enough to terminate for calls. So if we ever get to the point where we have to terminate, there is listed in the North Carolina terms and conditions. We have two different ways to terminate. We have termination for convenience because things happen. So if we ran out of funding or the building, like I know the administration building right now, we are now all at home because they're tearing down our building. So we had to terminate for convenience the janitorial contract because they're going to tear down the building and the building will not exist for them to clean anymore. So that was a termination for convenience. We always give a notice. You have 30 days, 60 days or whatever, and this contract will expire. We would love to continue working with you, continue to bid on our projects. If it's termination for cause, that's where we have found you in breach of contract, and it is an immediate termination. Just make sure that if anything is ever terminated, that you return all of that state-issued equipment and the badges. In the termination letter that you will receive, there will be final billing instructions. And just know that if there was a performance guarantee that was submitted with the initial contract, if you are held in breach, we can use that performance guarantee to pay for services going forward. So it could be withheld for breach of contract. Any questions there with performance?
No new questions in the chat and no hands raised currently. Oh, I just saw a hand go up.
All right, Nadia.
Hello. So my question is about standard performance evaluation templates. Do you have a template that you could share maybe with the vendors so they know how they're being measured? I mean, I know every contract is different, but I think it gives folks a better handle on knowing, you know, a little bit more in advance what they're going to be measured against.
So I know in like our janitorial contracts, we manage all these buildings in downtown, so we have a lot of those. We put a copy of that performance evaluation, the inspection report or whatever, in the back of the solicitation document. So you know up front, this is what you're being judged on. If there is something that you're bidding on where potentially there are, ask it during the question and answer period. Can I get a copy of the inspections of what we will be inspected on? Because there aren't a standard template. It is based on that particular project. So we don't have a standard one that we use across the board for everybody.
Sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sometimes with IT contracts, you know, there are different things, and if it's not always clear, there is a deliverable, but sometimes it's kind of nebulous. So, all right, thank you.
Yeah, that's another one of those times in that other class. I mean, that is one of the most important things, is that during that question and answer period, use that to your advantage. You can ask anything and they have to give you an answer. You can ask, what are you currently paying? Who currently has this contract? Those types of questions too during that question and answer period. So you can use that to your advantage for sure.
All right, thank you.
I'm gonna butcher your name. Corinthian?
Yes. Hi, how you doing, Meredith?
Good.
All right. I have a basic question about, it's a terrible experience when a contractor is terminated for cause, right? Because they breached the contract. But in my world, where we buy a business that already has a relationship with the state, and if that business that we buy was terminated in some context, is there a way under new management to mend that relationship with, you know, if we come in and try to make the case that I'm the new owner of the company and I'd like to mend that relationship? I mean, is that possible?
My suggestion would be there is no currently anywhere between the different departments where we share our vendor performance. So if you're going back to a department where you had your company had a problem and you go to rebid, there's nothing saying you can't add something to your bid that includes, this company is in new management, this is now what we're doing, you know, those types of things. Just submit it with your bid, at least it's there. So to be able to, when you're terminated from cause, There's nothing saying that you couldn't bid on another project. It just potentially could keep us from awarding that project. But if we had something in your bid, so what we would basically have to do is say, look at all of this bad inspection and all of this documentation and where we had to terminate this contract. That's why we don't want to go with this vendor, even though they offer XYZ. And we're going to go with this other vendor because we have all of this documentation. So if you submitted with your bid, that was under a past contract, and now I'm this new owner, and now this is what we do, that could kind of counteract that just with documentation, I would think.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's nothing saying you can't ever give more information than we need. So, you can always give more information than what we're asking you for.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to continue on. Yeah.
Thank you, Meredith.
You're welcome. All right, so we're going to get you paid. We're going to start talking about the payment process and different things that we have with the state of how to make that happen. So the state is costs are billed by the vendor must be in accordance with what's in the contract payment terms and match that purchase order. So we're going to make sure that your purchase order and your contract match. Those the costs and everything match. If it's split up into different deliverables, we make a line item for every deliverable so that way you can invoice as you go for those different deliverables. Typically, the state pays net 30 from the time the invoice is approved by the agency and gets to fiscal for payment. And I'm going to mute you if you can. So typically the state pays net 30. We do not pay any deposits. We do not pay anything up front. We pay after services are rendered. So just know that here at DOA, we have the best fiscal office in the state. So we usually pay a lot less than net 30. But that is what it says in the terms and conditions, is that we pay net 30 from the approved invoice. All payments to the vendor are dependent on subject on the availability of funds. That is also in the terms and conditions. So with that being said is that if we have given approval to move forward with that, we have secured those funds. Just know that if like the renewal, that could be that we don't have funding going forward to execute that next renewal of the contract. So we wouldn't execute it, and that's why that contract would then end if it was an optional renewal. The state does not agree to pay costs such as interest, late fees, penalties, or attorney fees. That's in our terms and conditions number 9. The state does have the capability for electronic payments. The vendor must submit a form to the Office of the State Controller. This is the link to be able to do that for that electronic funds transfer, because we finally got that set up because it's 2024. So you can go in there and register. That is different than your registration as a vendor with EVP. All right, so invoices. Invoices are to be issued to the ordering division or contract administrator. Don't send your invoices to purchasing. They should go to your contract administrator because they're the ones that have to approve it, that they've received everything, that they have everything's installed, everything's up and running, and that they're all good. Make sure you include the item description or the services completed in your invoice. We will not accept just an email that says that these things are $5. It needs to be a branded invoice. Purchase order should be on it to make sure that you're putting the correct purchase order for that term of that contract. You could have additional purchase orders for every year. It should have the contract number that could be different than your purchase order number. And then if it required you to submit those reports with the invoice, just make sure that those reports are there. Ensure that your remit to address is current in EVP. That's on you guys to keep it up to date. That's where your check is going. So that is that remit to address is in EVP. That's where you can update that. We do not have the availability to update that remit to address. So you have now completed your contract. You've gone through all the hoopla. You did a great job. And so we're going to talk about contract closeout. So some closeout activities, ensure that all those deliverables are met, make sure that you've completed everything so that then we can complete that final payment. Return all of that equipment, the access badges, anything that we gave you up front, make sure you return all of that. Close out any access to state-supported systems. So if for some reason you had to get into one of our web applications or anything like that, make sure that you close out all of that, because that's what we're going to make sure that you no longer have access to. Ensure that all disputes or corrective actions have been resolved so that we can continue to do that great work and have that great relationship, that if we did have a dispute, that everything's fixed before that contract ends. Comply with the state record retention policies. Know that there is, if you go out onto the web, you can just look up North Carolina record retention policies. For us in purchasing, we keep a procurement file 5 years after expiration. So if you have a file, make sure you're keeping with those records so that you have it to reference. Let's say it has been several years and now you're with a new situation. You want to make sure that you have the reference that shows all of those past performances and now how you're doing better with those better performances. So I would suggest to keep those retention policies, not only for us, but you could match yours for any contracts that you have with the state. Final acceptance by the project manager is received so that you know that everything's been done. That project manager, contract administrator could be the same person. Make sure that everything's done. Submit your final invoicing. And then if any additional tasks need to be completed. So if you had anything that you did this piece and now you need to do this piece, just make sure that contract is amended or extended to allow for those additional things. Because if the contract ends, we can't amend it. Now we're in a whole new situation where we got to write a whole new contract, go through the whole process again. So if you had additional things and you're getting towards the end of your term, make sure that you get those amendments in and that your contract administrator, they're aware that you get anything that needs to be extended done and through the process before it ends. Because we could extend just to make that process happen. But once it's ended, it's done. We no longer have a contract and then we'd have to go all the way through the process again. So any questions there on the closeout?
See, it looks like we have a new question. One question in the chat: when does the state pay if it's an ongoing service that will cover the entire year, like a school year?
So it would depend on if your contract had deliverables that have to be met to then be paid, or if it's a monthly service, you could pay by the month. It would really depend on what those tasks are and what those deliverables are as to when you can invoice, but that should all be written into that contract as to when you can invoice, whether it's monthly, whether it's at the end of a phase or whatnot. So all of that would be written into the contract as to when you can invoice. If you have any questions on it, ask it up front to make sure you know.
And then Crystal Moses has a question that I think I'll just, her question is there a way to connect with the vendors on this call? There may be an instance where I'm awarded a project that I need their service or product to assist me. And I just want to say, Crystal, that it's okay for you to place your contact information. Anyone can do that in the chat, and anyone can capture it according to their needs.
And I know that during the bid process, there could potentially be site visits. Another good way, networking opportunity between vendors, is maybe there you see a bid out there and you're not going to be the prime and you want to be a subcontractor. Show up to the site visit and network. There's nothing saying that you can't meet the other vendors that are there and say, hey, I do this piece. You want to get together and submit a bid. Just know that if you're only a subcontractor, we're going to contract with that guy. But that's a good way to network within people that you find out that are interested in doing the same work there at those site visits.
And that was the last question in the chat. So if anyone else has a question and wants to unmute, you're welcome to do that at this time.
And that is the end. So if you have any other questions, let me know. Otherwise, thanks for attending, and I hope this information was important.